Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here. Thanks for joining us on this last Unite for Nature webinar of our four-part series. It's been fantastic to do the webinar series and to have the great conversations that we've been having over the last couple of months. All of that's in the lead up and anticipation to the In Real Life Private Land Conservation Conference in October on Ngunnawal country, not very far away. We're doing we've just shifted from the month to the weeks countdown, so we're really excited and looking forward to it. And the program is looking excellent. Some amazing speakers. Do jump online and have a look at who's speaking and inspire yourselves to get along and hear about the amazing work that's going on right around the country. So yeah, very excited. Just giving everyone a minute to join. I know it takes people a few minutes to jump online, but I would like to thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today. I know everyone's flat out. So to get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands that we're all meeting today. For me, that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge those that are joining us online from the countries that you're joining from. Please feel free to put the country that you're joining from in the chat function on your webinar. And we also have people joining us from Dja Dja Wurrung country today. I'm really excited to be hearing from them and hearing about the stories of the work that's occurring not far from me here. I'm Jodie Gunn. I'm the CEO of the Australian Land Conservation Alliance. I'm joined by an incredible panel that I'll introduce to you in just a moment. Nature is and its central role as the keystone of our well-being, our food security, our economies and cultures is now well recognised. From Parliament to community, around dinner tables and board tables at farm gates and school gates, society is taking note and taking steps, importantly, to remedy the declining condition of our natural environment. And together we're driven by our collective responsibility to stem the tide of loss and decline. In response, innovative collaborations, long-standing partnerships and visionary thinking are unlocking finance, galvanising action and forging networks to amplify the ongoing urgent management, protection and restoration of country. So as we warm up to our annual conference, as I just mentioned, on Ngunnawal country in October, this four-part series has been showcasing the importance of really unique, really diverse partnerships, partnerships across industries and across cultures. So we're really excited about the stories that we've been sharing as we make our way towards PLC 23. Today, we're going to hear about the partnership between Bush Heritage Australia, one of our conference partners, and JARA. And so to share that story, I'm joined today by a fantastic panel. They include Bambi Lees. Bambi is our Aboriginal Partnerships Manager based in Victoria for Bush Heritage Australia. Bambi identifies as a Torres Strait Islander with paternal links to the Torres Strait and Thursday Island. She spent the majority of her life in central Victoria on JARA country and has worked with government and community across her career. Bambi joined Bush Heritage Australia in 2022 and is currently the Aboriginal Partnerships Manager. She spends her time living, listening and working on JARA country with elders and community and considers this a great privilege. Thanks for joining us, Bambi. Granville Morgan is the Healthy Country Planning Manager for Jandak. Granville is a proud Yorta Yorta man that was born in Ballarat. Grew up between Bendigo and Shepparton. Granville's cultural heritage is important to him and he enjoys sharing cultural stories and knowledge to the future generations to come. His passion is being out on country and connecting with nature, working with like-minded people to heal, teach and promote collaborative thinking to heal country. Granville is currently employed by Jandak, which means country in the Djara language. And finally, joining us today is Reece Swain, the National Fire Program Manager from Bush Heritage Australia. Reece grew up on a cattle property in far north Queensland and currently resides at Mackens Beach, north of Cairns. Sounds wonderful coming from down here in Queensland, but I know you're not joining us from there today. Joining us from down in Tasmania. Reece is currently employed as the National Fire Program Manager for Bush Heritage Australia working on reserves and partnerships with Aboriginal landholders right across the country to plan, implement and report on fire management activities. Over the past 15 years, you've spent his time supporting land management activities from the Torres Strait, Kimberley and the Northern Territory. What a lineup. I am so excited to speak with them all today. Really fantastic. Before we get started, and they're about to talk to us about the work that they're doing, a couple of rules for those of you that have joined us online. You're all on mute and there's no video, so we can't see or hear you, but you can see and hear us. The chat function and Q&A so that you can engage with us are both open. So use the chat, again, to enter your acknowledgement of country to get started, but also to speak with each other. Use the Q&A function in particular for questions. I'll be drawing on those as we get to the end of the opening presentation and our panel discussion. So please, as things come up, thoughts come up, questions come up, put them in the Q&A function and we'll get to them towards the end of the discussion today. You can uptick them, I think, so please do that so that I can ask the questions that most people want answered. And so that's it for the instructions. We'll start with an introduction about the partnership from our speakers, and that'll be followed by a facilitated Q&A from me and then Q&A from the audience. So Reese, I think you're getting us started. Over to you to introduce this incredible partnership.
Thanks, Jodie. So thank you very much to the Australian Land Conservation Alliance for having us here today. It's great to be part of the webinar, and really looking forward to hearing some of the questions that come through a bit later on. So as Jodie mentioned, I'm the National Fire Program Manager for Bush Heritage Australia, and we operate a program across the entire country. You can see the map up on the slideshow up on the screen there now. And so for those of you who don't know who Bush Heritage is, I'm not going to dwell too far on it, but we're a not-for-profit independent conservation organisation that manages or buys land and manages it for conservation. We work in partnership with other landowners, so Aboriginal landowners, and also the agricultural sector. So we cover, or our work almost covers, about 14 million hectares across 42 reserves, and as I said, in partnerships across the country. The program that I manage is the National Fire Program, and we really support right-way fire activities. That's our main goal. So planning, implementing mitigation activities such as putting in fire breaks, asset protection, identifying cultural values out in the reserves, and coming up with strategies to protect them from the negative impacts of fire. We respond to bushfires as well. We monitor our effectiveness, and we report on those fire management activities to make sure that we are meeting our objectives. Engaging traditional owners to ensure that our plans and activities include the right people, and the activities are occurring at the right time is a big focus for us. We try our best to make sure that happens through all phases of our fire management. We focus heavily on training and skills development as well to build capacity as we grow, and managing risk throughout the operations of all phases of the fire management operations is also another key focus. And many of our partnerships involve fire management through varying degrees of involvement from the Bush Heritage Fire Program. I'll get into that a little bit later on, but today we're going to be focusing on a strong partnership in Central Victoria that has been developing for some time. Cultural burning is just one of the activities that the partnership delivers. You'll hear a little bit more from me a bit later on. So for now, I'm going to hand over to the real stars of the webinar, and that's Bambi and Granville down in Victoria. So over to you, Bam and Granville.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for that intro, Reese. Just before we start, we'd like to acknowledge that we're on Jara country here in Central Victoria, around Bendigo, for those who know Vic. And we are wanting to share with you a project that we've been working on for a long time. We're getting towards the end in terms of getting to where we are in a place that we can actually work together and with traditional owners and start caring for country in the way that it should be. So the project and the strategy that we're developing is called Warwick Gold Canoe. The map that's up at the moment is the outline is the Dja Dja Wurrung area estate, or the country that belongs to Dja Dja Wurrung. And although it's a bit hard to see, the red reserves are the Bush Heritage Reserves. So we acknowledge that we're only one small part in terms of managing and having an impact on this country. We talk about Jandak, which is the Dja Dja Wurrung word for country. So rather than work in isolation, we want to ensure that we're managing our reserves that acknowledge the larger landscape. So rather than different agencies and landowners, doing their own thing, we really want to be able to play a part across a much broader landscape and do it in the right way, the way that it was for many, many thousands of years. Country's really sick. This landscape that we work in has had a history of gold. It's mainly agricultural land. And so the importance of preserving the natural areas that are within Dja Dja Wurrung country becomes more and more imperative and important. So I guess I acknowledge that Jara can't look at country in isolation. They can't manage in a way that doesn't take into account other people's stewardship of land, but it's often in conflict with the sorts of things that we're trying to do in terms of preservation and conservation. So there are a few areas there. I might hand over to Granville just to talk a little bit about Jara's footprint on this country in terms of joint management with Crown land managers. And really, that's our point of difference in terms of bush heritage. We have freehold land and we don't have the same restrictions as what government has, and that's what makes this really flexible for us. It means that we can dream big, that we can have big visions. We're not held to the bureaucracy in a sense And so I know for me, that point of difference, having worked in government, certainly gives me the freedom to be able to, yeah, like I said, dream big and just not have to be locked into any particular way, Western science or management. So we're wanting to do this work and the term is right way. So using right way science, using right way thinking, and also allowing that the space and the time for Jara to move into these places, to lead, to reinstate, you know, their self-determination, and be able to, you know, ensure that these places are there for future generations. I guess Jara hasn't been on country for how long? You know, they were moved off country in the early 1800s, in the mid 1800s. And so now we're seeing that time of retrieval of knowledge, and wanting to have a major presence back on country where they belong. In my mind, land and people are one, and traditional owners are an essential ecosystem function. We took people off the land, and look what happened to the land. So we need to put people back into that land in order for it to be cared for in the proper way. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. Yeah, well said. And Wominjeka to everyone out there tuning in. Yeah, I'm Granville Morgan. I work for Jandak and have so for the last 18 months. In the last 15 months, I've been a part of the building and engaging with Bush Heritage through the partnership going back 15 months ago, and sort of through the journey, just the understanding of the properties sort of that's been acquired, and how sitting down with Bush Heritage at the table with the inclusion with Jara and Jandak alike to strategically come up with ways that we can heal country together, with both our country plans forming more of an alignment to our values and aspirations and what we like to achieve sort of moving forward into the future. This diagram's a bit of a timeline over the journey where sort of Bush Heritage was founded in 1991. The sort of significant sort of ones there, the recognised settlement agreement that sort of came out with the boundaries around the Bush Heritage reserves, which are sort of in line sort of with what we're trying to achieve with healing country, with aligning sort of these properties throughout central Victoria to connect that corridor, and allow Jara to be back on country and practice, you know, their customs and traditions to bring that health and our spirit back to country as well. So it's absolutely critical that we work together in a collaborative way, that sit at the table together, walk beside each other to make these decisions moving forward. From my experience working with Bush Heritage through my journey, like working with in the private sector rather than the public organisations and agencies and stuff like that. Like Bambley mentioned before, there's that bureaucratic, you know, blockers and stuff, and there's downtime to get things through the process and stuff like that. But yeah, sort of with bush heritage and the reserves, they're really open, transparent, forward thinking, with the traditional owners to, jump on board and, look through the cultural lens and understand about how country is sick. We need to listen to it to understand and talk to country as well to be a part of knowing to how to, fix a country that's been sick for over 250 years. We just sort of left it. So it's going to take that and a bit more to bring it back to a state where we're sort of, we're going to be happy with for future generations to come. So it's a long journey and things happen slow, just like partnerships as well. Takes sort of both sides as well, but it's doing it in the right intent. And doing it for the, the purpose of healing Jandak.
You can see that it has been a very long journey, right? It really does take time. There's been a lot of players that have been involved in terms of starting conversations, other people coming along, and continuing those conversations, but it does take time. And I guess, Jara aren't going away. This is their country. They're always going to be here. They will continue to be here. But people like myself, I guess, who are working within an organisation, we come and go. But I know that, for example, Granville's kids will inherit all of this. And so it's really important that we have that vision and that long-term, dare I say it, we're here for a good time, not a long time, and so these things really do take time. And I think, for people to understand that, is a really important factor. It's a key success factor in terms of building a relationship. And I prefer to use the term relationship rather than partnership. Because as I said, the people that move into bush heritage after, we've retired or gone elsewhere, there'll be other Jara people coming on, and they hold this knowledge. They hold that history. Whereas often within organisation, it's very, short periods of time, in comparison to traditional owners. So I think we really need to be mindful of that the guard is always going to change when it comes to these partnerships, but having those fundamental understandings, having the principles and the protocols in place is really, what needs to be supported. Things don't change with changes of government. It is very much a one story, a long story, and the story doesn't change. Whereas for many organisations, our internal stories do often change. So, which brings us to Warrika Gold Canoe, which is a shared strategy, a shared strategic plan. So I made the comment yesterday in our community meeting that, Jara's done so much work. They've developed their own strategies. It's written in their way. We shouldn't have to rewrite these strategies. The strategies already exist, and so we really do need to find the shared values and they're there. And people often, I guess, in terms of partnerships, everyone has their own little stake, but we've come together to really actually to find all that common ground, to find the common ground. Of course, we come with our own interests and potential, you know, and our own priorities. But at the end of the day, if we're caring for country right way, then all these things will be taken care of. You know, I just feel that if we manage country in a way that is observant of the cultural practices, being able to slow down and listen deeply, then it's like the penny starts to drop. We have to retrain ourselves. I suppose, you know, I've walked in two worlds in terms of being conditioned to a certain way of management in NRM. And we talk about decolonising. And this is actually a way to being able to do that. You know, it's definitely a power shift. And I think there's fear that comes with that as well. But, you know, it has to be like this in terms of having these shared strategies and not working in isolation anymore. And JARA are the people who are driving that, you know, multiple interests over huge areas of land, and yet we all want to manage on our own. Well, that's not the track that we're going to be going down. So there's strategies that have been developed, and it is still very much in draft form, and we're still working on that. But the journey's been really interesting. The conversations have been fantastic. And in having those conversations, and lots of them over many, many years, you know, the outcome will be a fantastic strategic plan that will guide us in the way that we want to manage, the way that country needs to be managed, and done in the right way. So these were some common focus areas. Some are more focused from a bush heritage perspective, and others are from more of a JARA perspective. So, for example, the returning spirits, which is something that is really fundamental, and it relates to not just totemic species or you know, relating to law and ceremony, but also our own spirits. And Jodie mentioned at the start of her, when she welcomed us, you know, people are integral to this country. We need it. We can't survive without it. You know, it's the thing that really feeds us. And I think what this plan also does is really ensure that all the intrinsic values are thought about rather than just the physical. And I think that's also a point of difference as well. Nothing can be talked about in isolation when it comes to talking about country. Everything is so interconnected that we can't just keep putting things in silos and managing for one thing. I've always said, or I've always thought, if we manage for cultural values in the landscape, it's like the icing on the cake. If we manage for cultural values, then, or the cultural landscape, then everything else is looked after. So, yeah. So that's one
Right.
strategy.
One strategy, Jandak Way. So this is traditional cultural fire healing country. So this is sort of one of the benefits of sort of working alongside a partnership with Bush Heritage. As a family day out on country at the Bush Heritage Reserve. We had kids out there, adults, like all ages. Had Amos Ackerson leading the cultural burn. There's a good turnout, 70 odd sort of people, I think there was that day. And basically just sort of talking to, and it was really good to have the kids out there really sort of teaching them on country by doing and just not talking, by showing and listening. My son was pretty keen to get out there and start burning stuff, but Uncle Amos sort of pulled him in the line, stepped back and showed him, how to burn, the grass and how slow and low sort of it burns through and how the other elements come out through to play with the wind and, the moisture, when's the right time to do it the right way. And yeah, to learn by doing by the right people, but to share that experience too. It was one of the best burns I've been a part of and experienced. And I'm looking forward to, this space here, the cultural burn and the Jandak Way, really sort of taking a control and being the sort of leading way how we burn into the future with partners and even with the broader community, bringing them in to this space to demystify about the fear of fire. We should have no fear of fire. It's just, that's what we're being taught and learned, through over years. But it's a tool to, manipulate the landscape as well, to find bush ducker, to regenerate, new growth, and many other things as well. So it's really just getting everyone together and actually getting in there and doing it and learning as well. And the outcomes are shared amongst everyone, the key learnings as well. So yeah, I really had a good day that day out there, and yeah, look forward to more into the future.
I guess just to sort of finish up, the challenges and the learnings of the journey, and there's been many, but for me, and I am naturally impatient, I always want things to happen yesterday. Things can't happen quick enough. It's like, but then the elders will pull you up and say, yeah, but we've waited 180 something years for this, another few years doesn't matter. And I think to myself, yeah, okay. So, the whole concept of time is different. The way Jara look at country, how they hear country, how they see country. That's what we need, I think, to take more note of. We can't manage these places remotely. We have to be on country. We have to be present. And life's busy. We live in a modern world, and I do find that people are pulled from pillar to post. I guess Jara's in a position where they're actually a statutory authority here in Victoria. And so, you know, what comes with that is a lot of responsibility and commitment. And often those things will be a priority for them. You know, just because Bush Heritage rings them up and say, hey, you know, can we have a yarn about this, or can we spend some time together? Well, there's, you know, there's always going to be competing priorities. And that's where I just think that we need to, as an organisation, and we do, we acknowledge JARA's internal governance. That is really important. Our way is not the right way, not always the right way. And, you know, it's actually, I've had to retrain myself. I've been conditioned to be a public servant, you know, and to have things done within a certain timeline and make sure that the reporting's done and all of this, that you know, bureaucratic stuff. And it does actually take away from the main goals. It takes away from what we're trying to achieve on the ground. It takes away from the relationships and just becomes it becomes a, I don't know, just a bureaucratic nightmare. You know, we just don't need to weigh ourselves down. And it really does feel so much lighter the way that we build this partnership, the conversations that we're having, a lot lighter. And I guess I know for myself, you know, I'm full of optimism for the future. I see these young ones on country and I just think, yeah, it's going to be in great hands, you know, and they're learning in a way that is right way as well. You know, they may never go to university, but they know exactly what they're doing. They know their country. They're learning by doing. And I just think that the future really is going to be in good hands. I guess reclaiming knowledge has been potentially a challenge for JARA because so much was lost. When I say lost, buried in archives and not accessible for traditional learners. But in terms of exercising their rights and interest, you know, we make space for that. And when that happens, we see wonderful things happen, you know, and we don't have to necessarily write it down because we see it and we feel it and we smell it, you know, and and so, you know, there's always going to be challenges and there's always going to be learning. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't learn something new. But it is about slowing down, really slowing down. I guess for JARA would have been some of the challenges there.
I think sort of through Jara and the likes of Jandak, the enterprise, some of the challenges is more say grants and funding, sort of, and having the resources to go out and heal country. Like Bambi was just saying before, it's more beneficial, not just for Jara, but just for other organisations and agencies if we do work in a collaborative way instead of isolation. You know, there's a lot of orgs out there doing similar stuff in isolation, rather than drawing that together and sort of pinpointing parts of country where we can connect up and have that linkage up, as it once was throughout the landscape. So that's been a bit of a challenge that I've seen, just with the funding and the resources, and sort of reaching out to different agencies and having that connection there as well. But comes with challenges, it comes with opportunities. When you do reach out and you do have them opportunities, for the likes of Bush Heritage as well, to have that allowance to open up the gates on, private land, and say, Jara's more than welcome to come in and, practice their culture, their customs, their cultural harvesting, look at strategies, where, we can, go out there and do it in a sustainable way with the resources through country as well. So that's been really good to sit down and strategize and talk and look how we can get to that and sort of map it out so you can sort of physically see there, and to have both of our country plans align to our goals that we aspire to get into, but setting up the stepping stones or the roadmap to the future to get there. And that's one of the challenges, because I like things to happen in a fast space. I like to see results yesterday, but you've got to be realistic on the approach that we take together through the journey. But having the right people at the right time together doing the right thing, it's phenomenal to work in that space. So that's sort of what I've found sort of my journey today. So
it really is building up that trust too. It's not just, they're not just words, we do have to keep it real. We have to mean what we say. And we have to commit to that. We can't just commit in the short term. This is the long haul. I don't, like I said, Jara's not going away anywhere. Bush Heritage has been able to acquire these reserves. They're there and will be looked after in perpetuity for the next generations. And we are planning for those next generations rather than the next funding cycle or the next season of weed spraying. And so I think coming up with the foundations, the principles, the protocols, rather than just concentrating on the work that needs to be done. The work's always going to be there. But if we don't get the understanding, the trust, the respect, the mutual respect, a shared understanding, finding that common ground, knowing what each of our strengths are and our limitations, I think that's really what will take us into the future in terms of working together. So I never thought that I would see this day. Honestly, I never thought I'd see Jara back on country in the way that they are now. And it's because they've walked the talk. They've brought people along. They've allowed us into their space, not the other way around. So, and I do get quite emotional because I honestly never thought that I would see the contribution that Djara are making right across the landscape. And it's joyful, it really is. So,
Bambi and Granville, that's a wonderful story to hear, and wonderful to hear the story of joy and optimism, which I think is what we all need right now, really, isn't it? It was fabulous to hear the way that you weave together through what you've shared with us today, the importance of community, the importance of culture, the importance of landscapes, the importance of the work, and hearing the stories of relationships and balancing time. I'm really interested in, if we had another hour, I'd be super interested in, just exploring this sense of time and, time in the wake of, in light of what it takes for a landscape, to recover and to regenerate, but also time in the context of the urgency that, many of us feel. You've both reflected just now about that, wanting to get things done and the sense of urgency we have in needing to address the challenges that are ahead of us. If we had another hour up our sleeves, I'd love to explore, the concept of time further with you in this discussion. I thank you for sharing the stories that you have shared with us today. You've touched so beautifully on both the work, the practice, of healing country and managing country, the practice of relationship building, which clearly takes a long time, seeing the time frame of the relationship between Djara and Bush Heritage, and what it takes to make meaningful relationships to deliver outcomes for people and culture and land and country. It has been great to hear from you both. I'm just going to put a call out. We've got only 10 minutes left. I have about 20 questions and I'll have time for about one of them. But if there are people in the audience that also would like to explore anything further from Bambi and Granville, please very quickly put your questions in the chat and I'll include those as I go through. One of the things that you touched on, and I guess that was the theme here that sort of connects all of these stories a little bit, is about fire as being central to this and an element of the work that is relevant practically, but also relevant in drawing organisations closer together. And I'm wondering, it's such an important tool for managing country, but an important tool for building relationships and bringing people together, intergenerational relationships, but also cross-cultural relationships. Just briefly, with the time we've got left, can you, I loved what you shared, Granville, about, your enthusiasm for that work, but I guess what are the opportunities that you see in the future for how fire can help to work to both bring outcomes together for country, but also for our work together in the future?
Yeah, so it's probably the first one for me that's connecting to culture and connecting to country. Just to be out on country with fire, to understand the different elements, the wind, the fuel loads, the dryness, and whatnot, sort of to go through and just to light the fires in sort of certain areas without having a gas drip and torch or anything like that. It's going out there with the right intent to burn, to bring that fuel reduction down, to understand the understory of the canopies, the different species, the bush tucker, that's on the ground, and the shrubbery, through that as well. So it's more intimate for me, like to go out and do that. Walk country and with the smoke and the fire, it brings that cleansing as well, you know, and it just heals the spirit. Like when I'm out there, I'm just smiling, loving it, and it's just makes me happy. Like I could do it every day if I could, but I don't think they'd allow that back at Jandak. But that's where we want to sort of get to, but just to build that cultural knowledge as well, to get to a space where, you know, through DECA, that Jara is leading and they're empowered to, through self-determination, to do that rather than going through the hierarchy of control. I think that needs to be, you know, flipped on its head or just chucked out altogether. We just need to not rethink ways. We need to deconstruct the colonised ways that we've been a construct to over a long time. And I'm sort of doing that, you know, through my coming through, I'm nearly 40, so halfway through my life, I'm still learning and building my cultural capacity as well. Then to do so. So everyone starts from somewhere, but yeah, it's understanding the learnings, but really to have that connection to country, or whatever country you come from, you know, it's about getting out and being a part of it. We want to make people, you know, happy, and we want to get them back out in the bush and the forest and all that sort of stuff as well. Not put fences around it and saying that it's restricted, it's too dangerous to go in there. Fuel loads are high, there's logs, you know what I mean, and shut things down seasonally and stuff like that. Like, let's sit down and have a discussion about, you know, what are the risks, what are the problems, what are the challenges, and, you know, collaboratively come up with, you know, ways and ideas and strategize how we can navigate through that rather than putting it in the too hard pile. But yeah, sort of just scratching the surface of things. But yeah, for me, cultural burning, yeah, it's sort of, it's part of who I am and my identity, and it's practicing and continuing customs and passing it on to my son, and so he can pass it on, you know, to my grandson and future generations, and broader the community's understanding as well, which, you know, Jara is now sort of through at the national parks and all that sort of stuff, gaining sort of dual names of reserves and stuff, which is really good to talk through language and that cultural education that you don't really necessarily, well, you don't get it at school and sort of stuff through, you know, when I grew up, and now it's sort of there in the landscape, and that's the Bush University, so to speak. So it's, yeah, sharing cultural knowledge, allowing people to look through that cultural lens. It's not scary, we're no different to anyone else, but having that, you know, open up that conversation so you can have a yarn about certain things. So yeah, that's sort of where it sort of starts for me. And yeah.
Thanks, Granville. Bambi, I've got a question for you. I'll come to in a second about the future. Before I do, I just ask Reese, obviously you're working right across Australia on partnerships related to fire all over. Parallels to this story, or what have you learned here that you can take, you know, out to those partnerships and vice versa, bring back here? You've got a minute and a half.
Sure, yeah. There's lots of great examples of, you know, of partnerships where Bush Heritage has been supporting, you know, Right Way Fire. One quick example I think I'll run through is up in the North Kimberley with Warrnambool Gumbera, where Bush Heritage has been a partner since 2011, you know, helping with the development and review of Healthy Country Plan. The whole IPA is a registered savanna burning project as well, with successful outcomes, meaning that you know, through careful planning and implementation of the early dry season burning program, it's all traditional owner led and informed according to the seasonal calendar. They've managed to, you know, completely switch the fire regime from, you know, large late dry season catastrophic wildfires to much more you know, aligned with the traditional way of burning, which was immediately after the wet season when the country is green and rivers are flowing and fires don't spread. So implementing that burning program, they've managed to completely change the fire regime to the benefit of the bush, getting people out on country. There's jobs. BAM and Granville mentioned before, empty country is unhealthy country. So people are out there, and and as a result of this amazing burning program that they've been doing up there, they've reduced the greenhouse gas emissions, and so it's recognised by the federal government, and they're rewarded with the issuing of Australian carbon credit units, and the sale of that goes to fund future works. It's just such a great story. There's learnings from all over Australia that we can bring to partnerships on how best to communicate, how best to, and as BAM and Granville mentioned as well, take that time to really find out what's most important, and not rush through with other agendas. Really sit down and collaborate for the future generations and the future health of country.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Royce, for sharing that example. I've got a question from the audience, which I'm going to get to quickly before I end with my question for you, Bam. Adrian, thanks everyone. He's not familiar with country down there. Not sure, Adrian, where you're joining from. But are you using fire in a cultural sense in forested landscapes, or more limited to open grassy country?
Both. You put fire where it needs it, and country will tell you that. And I'm just, I guess, repeating what gets told to me. It does. We put it anywhere it needs it. In wetlands, in grasslands, forested areas. And look, I can't wait till we move a bit further down this track, particularly with fire, because I think the results that you see are very, they're right there. The results are there within a couple of months after a fire, after a cool burn, or, in different places, wherever it's been applied. And, you can see it. You can see the results.
Thanks, Bam.
Yeah.
I have one last question, which I'll start with you, Bam. I'll then open it up to everyone. One of the things that you said as you were speaking earlier was one of the things you like to do is to dream big. So if I could ask each of you to dream big in 20 seconds, what would be your big dream for this collaborative work together and the outcomes that it might ultimately achieve?
That it is a practice that is utilised and taken up in the right way by all land managers. That's my dream. No more slashing and burning.
Thanks, Bam. What about you, Granville? Dream big. What would this look like?
I'd like to see some of the rare and declining species, flora and fauna, sort of come back with the sort of the cultural burn. It's about getting country back nearly to a blank canvas to allow these species to come back, to have that holistic, approach to it. Like Bambi was just saying, like grass and forest lands and stuff like that, they all need fire in them. Once you see, the frogs and the grasshoppers and stuff coming back through, the lower layer of the grasses and competitive native grasses, you see the birds come back too. And when you see the birds come back, that's, singing, you know what I mean? That's the country singing back to you saying it's healthy. So, yeah, I'd like to see, the emus, be, brought back through, more central Victoria, even Galgal, the dingo, and the eastern quail, bringing back, stuff that, it has been, given a hard time over all these years and nearly phased out. that's what I'd like to really see. And I dream a bit.
Awesome. Yep, love to see that too. Thanks, Granville. Reece, what would you like to see? Dream big.
Dream big. Yeah, well, I feel the biggest impediment to any of this work is sort of land tenure. So, you know, we sometimes can't change that land tenure, but if landowners could all sort of work more collaboratively together with a regional approach to managing land, for fire, for weeds, ferals, for all of those things that impact negatively on biodiversity, and it has it will have so many benefits long term, and that's the only way we will be able to overcome some of these threats.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all. We are over time. I want to thank you all for the discussion today. It's been wonderful hearing from you, Bambi and Granville, an incredible partnership, a long relationship and story. You talked about good times and long times. I think, Bam, we're here for a good time and a long time. I reckon both of those things are important. It's been great hearing about your journey together and the work that you're doing both, you know, out there on Jarrah and right across Australia. For everyone that's joined us, the recordings will be made available, I think, next week. So keep your eyes out for that. These 4 webinars are a reminder or a lead up to the conference that will be held in October on Ngunnawal country, October the 16th to the 18th. I know not everyone can get there, but we're hoping to see as many of you there as possible. Unite for Nature does reflect that protecting, managing and restoring our natural environment is everyone's business. We've heard that today, and we look forward to bringing a diverse range of stakeholders together to explore solutions that we can all be part of. Again, thank you for coming along today. Thank you for listening to Bam, Granville and Reece's story, and thank you, Bam, Granville and Reece, for your time and generating really interesting thoughts and discussion for us all. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.